Order. I call the member for Dawson.
Well, thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. And it's no wonder that the member for Cunningham doesn't want us to talk about this, because words come back to bite us. And, you know, back in 2010, when she spoke in this place on the Anti-People Smuggling and Other Measures Bill, she was quick to praise the then Rudd government for the turnaround that it had done with the Howard government's people smuggling laws and the framework we put in place. She said that the whole thing was about having a more humane framework for those people who were seeking asylum, and to take a much harsher position with those who are seeking to make profits from the exploitation of those people. And that's what she said about the changes that her government made to the asylum, to the illegal immigration and border protection regime that the Howard government had in place, and look at where it has got us. And, you know, protecting Australia's borders is one of the most first and foremost and fundamental roles that any government should play. Yep. It's a role that calls for strength. It's a role that calls for resolve. It calls for a government to stand up for its people and protect our country. Yep. And what we've seen from this government is weakness and wavering. Yep. We've seen indecision and wringing of hands. The only resolve from this government that we've seen is an absolute commitment to shift the blame, a strong commitment to doing anything but admit that they got it wrong, a determined resolve to say anything except to apologise for the damage, the waste and, yes, the deaths — how humane was that, member for Cunningham — that resulted from their actions. So averse to taking control was this government that they actually outsourced their responsibilities. They outsourced the responsibilities of the Prime Minister. They outsourced the responsibilities of the Immigration Minister. It's too hard, they said. We can't do it. It's too hard. Instead of reinstating border protection policies that actually worked, policies that were actually proven to work, instead of admitting that they tried to fix what actually wasn't broken to start with and put it back, those representatives, or so-called opposite, threw up their hands and outsourced their responsibilities to a committee. But that's not the first time this government has outsourced its job. What those opposite gleefully pulled down, when those opposite gleefully pulled down our border security policy, amid all the backslapping and comments like the member for Cunningham's, they also outsourced the control of our borders. They outsourced the government's job, not to a committee, but to some of the most disgusting, vilest creatures on this planet, the people smugglers. And let me be very clear about this. People smugglers are criminals who have sent hundreds of people to their deaths. People smugglers are criminals who trade human lives for dollars. These are the people to whom the Rudd and the Gillard Labor governments have outsourced control of our borders to. The people smugglers are the ones who have been and still are in control of our borders. They are the ones who decide who comes to Australia and who doesn't. It's certainly not this government deciding that. The people smugglers are the ones who set the price. They control the market and they dictate how much it costs to risk your life in a boat journey to the promised land. And that price is high, thousands and thousands of dollars. The price is actually beyond the reach of most legitimate asylum seekers. Again, let's be clear here. There is a difference between a genuine asylum seeker and someone who's an economic refugee. There's a difference between those fleeing persecution and those searching for an easier life. Even today, this government and those opposite refuse to use the term illegal immigrant. But let's be clear on that point too. Australia has immigration laws. There are legal ways to actually enter this country, but there's also illegal ways. Paying $10,000 to one of those vile people smuggling scum to get on a boat to go to Christmas Island is an illegal way of entering our nation. Many of the people on board these boats are not actually fleeing anything. They're not repelled, they're drawn. They are drawn to Australia and to this soft-touch government, and they're willing to travel through or over as many countries as it takes to actually get here. Afghanistan is a place where many of them are coming from. If you have a look at an atlas, you can see it's a landlocked country. Of all of its bordering nations, Australia is actually not one of them, surprise, surprise. There are only two ways out of Afghanistan, by air or by land. If a genuine refugee flees from persecution in Afghanistan by land, then most likely the most direct route is either by crossing the border into Pakistan, crossing the border into India, crossing the border into Bangladesh, crossing the border into Burma, crossing the border into Thailand, or crossing the border into Malaysia. After travelling through all of those countries, and any number of which may have been a safe haven from persecution, it is still a boat journey or an airfare to get from Malaysia to Indonesia. But what's more likely is a flight out of Afghanistan. These people aren't short on money. If they were, they couldn't pay the people smugglers. They couldn't pay for the airfare out of Afghanistan in the first place. Instead of flying to Australia, they get on a plane with their passport and they fly to Indonesia. They wander down to a boat just dressed like they've just walked off a street in inner city Melbourne. They pay thousands of dollars to the people smugglers, jump on a boat, call Australia to come and rescue them, and throw their iPhone and passport overboard, and they wait. The situation is a con, and it should be viewed in the context of those genuine refugees we see on the news in refugee camps across the world, such as those in Africa. Those who can't afford to jump on a plane and fly to Indonesia. Those who can't afford to pay $10,000 to people smugglers. Those who have had their homes burnt, their families killed, who can't even afford to eat. Well, Australia is a lucky country. We're a very generous country. We take our responsibility seriously, and we have one of the largest intakes of anywhere in the world when it comes to refugees. But because our Prime Minister and this government outsource control of our borders to the people smugglers, those who are most in need are the least likely to actually receive some assistance. The flood, this absolute flood of illegal immigrants taking advantage of the government's now free water taxi service, it's a direct result of this government's failure to control our borders. And here's the thing about borders. If there's a great big hole in it, it's actually no longer a secure border. What this government did was take down a 3-panel fence, which was the Howard government's border protection regime. 1, offshore processing in Nauru and Manus Island. 2, temporary protection visas, ensuring that if the illegal immigrant who entered here was found actually to be a genuine refugee, they would be only issued a temporary protection visa. That is, they wouldn't stay here permanently, they would only stay here until the threat in their country was gone. And they would not be entitled to permanent residency. And the third one was turning back the boats where it was safe to do so. And then, they dismantled that 3-panel fence, and they wondered why the people smugglers were pushing through thousands of illegal immigrants. Then, when the committee, who the Prime Minister and the Immigration Minister outsourced their jobs to, told them to reinstate the fence, they reluctantly put up just 1 panel. They were kicking and screaming to restore Nauru. That's one part of the effective fence. But here's a lesson from Fencing 101. 1 panel of a 3-panel fence will actually stop nothing. The Howard government knew that it took more than one part of their solution to actually stop the boats, and the coalition knows it's going to take more than one part. Everyone knows it except those sitting opposite. You can't build a rabbit-proof fence with 1 strand of wire. The Chinese didn't build the Great Wall with a single stone. The Dutch didn't hold back the sea by throwing in 1 shovel full of dirt and calling it a dike. The dike around northern Australia has sprung a leak under the Rudd government, and it continues under the Gillard government, and now it's a torrent. 10,000 illegal immigrants arriving by boat this year alone. 3 boats in the past 24 hours. An absolute torrent of shame for this government, an embarrassment for this government, who say they have got a plan to stop the boats, and the minister's over there. Unfortunately, it's the wrong boats. It's the legal fishing vessels that we have up in the Coral Sea that you're wanting to stop, but you can't bring yourself to actually stop the people smuggling boats. It is clear this government has outsourced complete control of the country to the Greens. It took 5 years of the coalition and most of Australia telling Labor that their border policy won't work, but it only took a few days of the Greens jumping up and down about a trawler, and this government toes the green line by moving to stop that boats. The only boats this government actually cares to stop is ones like that, and ones up in the Coral Sea that are legal fishing vessels. Outsourcing decision-making to a committee is not governing. Outsourcing border control to people smugglers is not governing. Outsourcing policy making to the Greens isn't governing. The government's not only failed, it's made itself redundant, and if you can't govern, you're out of a job.
Member Dawson's time has expired.